In the next chapter, we can see another development in their character. This was news that put a different light on things. Atticus had to defend Tom Robinson, whether he wanted to or not. I thought it odd that he hadn't said anything about it. We could have used it many times defending him and ourselves. He had to. That is why he was doing it. Equals fewer fights and less fussing. So again, we can see how Scout doesn't really understand the messages that her father's trying to communicate to her at this point in chapter 16. She's still seeing things from a childlike perspective, and she doesn't understand the importance of what Atticus is doing in defending Tom Robinson, the black man who's been accused of rape by Mayala Ewell. In chapter 21, during the trial scene, Scout starts to realise the importance of what her father is doing in society and the positive impact he's making on the Negro population in Macon, Alabama. Miss Jean Louise, I looked around. They were all standing all around us in the balcony and on the opposite wall. The Negroes were getting to their feet. Reverend Sykes' voice was as distant as Judge Taylor's. Miss Jean Louise, stand up, your father's passing. So this is a universal mark of respect that the Negro population give to Atticus after they've seen the tenacity with which he has defended Tom Robinson in an almost impossible situation. In chapter 22, she learns from Miss Maudie how important her father is to the social project. I simply wanted to tell you that there are some men in this world who were born to do unpleasant jobs for us. Your father's one of them. So as the novel develops, we see how Scout begins to mature. She starts to understand what makes her father function, his motivations as a man, his ethics. At the end, she changes because of her relationship with her father and the positive influence which Atticus has upon her. At the very end, she realizes the importance of having empathy. Atticus was right. One time he said you never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around them. Just standing on the Radley porch was enough. So when we look at the types of questions that have been asked on the sample papers, one of the questions that came up was to list any 3 characteristics you believe are important in describing an interesting character in fiction. And as I said to you earlier, if you're clever and you study a relationship between 2 characters, the same key moments could be recycled to answer questions on character. So you might say something like, we learn about characters through what they do, what they say, what other characters say about them and act around them, how they're described and how they behave in times of challenge and hardship. When a character is introduced in a work of fiction, descriptive language can be used to describe their physical appearance, how they behave, can give the reader a sense of the dominant characteristics in their personality, and deliberately misspelled words, slang and colloquialisms can give us a sense of their level of education, their accent, and where they come from. So when we look at Atticus in this novel, the key moments that show he's a man of integrity are pretty obvious from the beginning. In defending Tom Robinson, Atticus gains the respect and admiration of the people of Macon, but his family suffer because of the racial prejudice which informed social attitudes in Alabama in the 1930s. So he very much is the moral hero of this story, as tragic and as difficult as it is to read at times. In chapter 11, we see Atticus as the father, transmitting his ideal of integrity through his exemplary behaviour of Miss Maudie Atkinson as she beats her morphine addiction. A lady, Jem raised his head. His face was scarlet. After all those things she said about you, a lady? She was. She had her own views about things, a lot different from mine, maybe, son. I told you that if you hadn't lost your head, I'd have made you go to read her. I wanted you to see something about her. I wanted you to see what real courage is. Instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. You rarely win, but sometimes you do. Now that advice is sound advice. It's difficult to hear, but it explains a lot about the truth of the world that we live in. In chapter 20, we see this man of integrity, giving everything he has, every argument, every thought, every emotion to defend Tom Robinson. He is a brilliant lawyer, and he relies on the facts of the case to persuade the jury He doesn't appeal to the racial prejudice, and this shows how he's a man of integrity. He tells us that the state has not produced one iota of medical evidence that the crime Tom Robinson is charged with ever took place. It has relied instead upon the testimony of two witnesses, whose evidence has not only been called into serious question and cross-examination, but has been flatly contradicted by the defendant. The defendant is not guilty, but somebody in this courtroom is. So we can clearly see how Atticus is a man who stands on his principles, and he wins the respect from the Negroes in chapter 21 as a result of his integrity. However, he's not perfect, and later in this novel he makes mistakes too. One major mistake that he makes is to underestimate the resentment boiling up inside Mr. Ewell after he's been publicly humiliated by Atticus during the trial scene. So in chapter 27, after he spits in Atticus's face at the post office and calls him a nigger lover, Aunt Alexandra warns Atticus of the potential threat posed by Bob Ewell. Atticus makes a serious mistake in judgment here and shows Ewell too much respect. "I don't like it, Atticus. I don't like it at all," was Aunt Alexandra's assessment of these events. "That man seems to have a running grudge against everyone connected with this case. I know how that kind are about paying off grudges, but I don't understand why he should harbour one. He had his way in court, didn't he?" Then later, in chapter 30, after Bob Ewell does, from Atticus's point of view, the unthinkable, and actually attacks his two defenceless children on their way home from the pageant, in chapter 29, Atticus's worldview is shattered. His very moral fibre is challenged. Atticus's integrity and belief in the law is challenged, as he thinks that it is Jen who has murdered Bob Ewell and refuses to cover up, as he thinks this is what Hecate is suggesting. The symbol of the mockingbird in the title becomes explicit at this point. It's a breakthrough moment in Scout's development as a character in her relationship with Atticus, so it's a key moment in the novel. Atticus looked like he needed cheering up. I ran to him and hugged him and kissed him with all my might. "Yes, sir, I understand," I reassured him. "Mr. Tate was right." Atticus disengaged himself and looked at me. "What do you mean?" "Well, it'd be sort of like shooting a mockingbird, wouldn't it?" And that is the moment when Scout has her epiphany. She has her realization. She realizes that this is the way that the adult world really works. It's not a pleasant realization for her as a character, that this is a world where, in effect, bullying is tolerated. So, in looking at the sample papers, one of the questions that you were asked was to use the criteria that you suggested in A and B above, write an assessment of the description and development of a character in any novel you studied as part of your coursework. So if you were to choose Atticus, for example, from To Kill a Mockingbird, you might begin by saying something like this. The character whom I've chosen to write about is Atticus Finch, Scout's father in To Kill a Mockingbird. We learn about Atticus primarily through the many key moments wherein he offers his fatherly advice to Scout, and through his daughter's descriptions of him. In chapter 3, we witness how fair-minded Atticus is. He treats both Walter Cunningham, who's a guest in the Finch household, and Jeanie Lee Scout as equals. He does not patronise them with his advice, but appeals to their inherent intelligence. This aspect of Atticus's character is presented by Harper Lee as he negotiates a process of compromise to persuade Scout to return to school. If you concede the necessity of going to school, we'll go on reading every night, just as we always have. Is it a bargain? His integrity is described by Miss Morley Atkinson in chapter 5, as she tells the children that Atticus Finch is the same in his house as he is in the public streets. Furthermore, Atticus shows himself to be very conscious of other people's feelings when he admonishes the children for acting out the story of Boo Radley in full view of the neighbourhood. Throughout the novel, Atticus impressed me by this highly refined sense of propriety. The life lessons which he taught the children always had a moral purpose, and he remains true to his moral code and sense of personal integrity. For example, in chapter 8, he explains to Scout the reasons why he agreed to defend Tom Robinson. The main one is, if I didn't, I couldn't hold my head in town. I couldn't represent this county in the legislature. I couldn't even tell you or Jen not to do something again. These statements help me to understand the type of man which Atticus was. His intelligence is also clearly seen during the trial of Tom Robinson as he attempts to persuade the jury of Tom's innocence by relying on the facts. While Harper Lee doesn't employ much descriptive language to describe Atticus, I clearly understood what type of man he was by reading about what he did, what he said, and what type of impact he had on the lives of other characters in the novel.